Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andy Meir, and welcome to the session on VR and animation. It's really great to be here on behalf of the University of Salford, where we've been doing a lot of VR work over the last few years, but in particular this year we've had a real surge of activity, and so having these conversations at this point is really great for us, and we're really delighted to be working with Manimation to talk about the future of VR. And we have a great panel with us today to talk about some of these things, but we also have some demos. So I'm going to carefully hand these out, and you can have a go on them. It's got content in them that relates to animation. Whether you find it or not is another matter. Who's tried a Samsung Gear VR? Hands up if you've tried it. Okay, so quite a lot of people haven't. So there's a bit of interface stuff. So it's got a phone stuck in the front here, which you can see. That's where the content comes from. On the top, it's got a focus wheel. So if your eyesight needs focusing, you can use that. On the right of this one, you've got a touchpad. So you can scroll forwards and backwards, select, and so on. That's the first version. That came out about 1.5 years ago. The more recent version is this one. Similar sort of setup, but with one of our things, we've got a controller. And within this one, we've got an application called Paint VR. And so you can use your controller as a kind of paintbrush and paint within the landscape. It's got a trigger on the top, and if you just press that, that will activate the flow of paint. I say that as if it's going to be really simple, but you'll struggle to figure it out. But if you don't, that's a sort of testimony of the failure of the interface. But many of these things are actually quite interesting and quite simple. So I'm going to hand these out. You can have a go on them. Please don't feel shy of just putting this on and looking really silly and feeling like you're stepping outside of our world. I'm going to pass this to you as a first option. If you feel uncomfortable, of course, you still have to try. But I'm going to start this one at the back. Please don't walk off with these. I'd be grateful to get them back at the end. This is not a prize-giving situation for the best experience.
You can tell he's featured in Glamour magazine.
We're not going to go on into that today, thank you, Andrew. But we have, when you enter the interface, hopefully, you might wait a second for it to start up, but then you'll see a kind of app store, and you might have to choose it, or it might just work straight away, or it might not work at all. And we'll talk about that too. So it's my pleasure to welcome our panel onto the stage here. We have, first of all, Chad Eickhoff, who's founder and CEO of Trick 3D, who's all the way from Atlanta. Big round of applause for Chad, please.
Thank you.
Trick 3D is a leading VR immersive studio, and I was looking. Chad is very well known, the studio is very well known for the Elf on the Shelf, an Elf story animation, which I'm sure nobody's heard of at all, have they? It's a very big deal over here too, which might surprise you, but we all remember the Elf on the Shelf very well. And I read from your bio that you ensure that your creations and worlds connect emotionally with those who experience them. What does that mean?
That's a great question. That's really just the threshold by which I come into content. I want it to be a meaningful, lasting experience. And so every time we're mapping out what we're doing, it's not just, is this cool and that'll be cool. That's a part of it, because that's one avenue by which to get to that. But hopefully combining the benefits of just storytelling and technology and aligning those two where they meet best, it becomes an actual meaningful experience.
And do you think that VR is particularly good at doing that? Is that one of the things that you think is its biggest opportunity to make that connection?
I think it's, 100%. I think if you remove all the discussion points that people have on, will VR be a thing? Are people going to be comfortable putting the headsets on? When you kind of pull those away and you just look at the actual experiences when done right, and hopefully the one that we brought, that our most recent one, we'll see a demo on in a minute, will kind of showcase how that can be the case. Yes.
Cool. So before we look at the reel, let's also introduce the rest of the panel. So we have Andrew Lord, who's sitting to my immediate left, co-founder, MD of Flipbook, which is in Manchester.
Indeed.
And
representing the Mancunian Massive.
And it's a multidisciplinary production studio, and you're on the board also of the Next Gen Skills Academy. But what I was really interested in is the work you talk about on 4D multisensorial VR experience. So maybe just explain that to people, and also
that's
what you've done.
Purely branding ploy. So we do a lot of experiential experiences for brands in VR. And one way to get people to try them is to sell VR. I mean, VR is already very immersive, but we always look at ways of making it even more immersive. So what we did with a lot of the experiences that we'll show you in a bit is look at new tech and how we connect that tech up to VR and provide an even more multisensory experience. So VR is already very immersive. You're immersed in an entirely different world. One of the experiences we did for the ice hockey for the NHL was to link it up to a haptic vest. So it's a separate bit of hardware kit you can buy. The actual piece we use is called a Subpack. It's an American company, released it just over a year ago. And we trialed it on one of our VR systems, and essentially it's a big bass woofer you strap to your back, and it links in with the visual content you program it, so it links in with the visual content. So if you are getting body checked, or you say you're driving a car and you crash it, you feel the vibrations through the actual jacket. So a lot of the experience we try and create, we try and make them more immersive than the actual simple VR platform allows. So that's what we mean by 4D. 4D or 5D, I mean, we've ramped up and said we've done a 5D experience as well, but essentially what that amounted to was actually spraying perfume in people's faces to make the experience a bit more interesting.
And did it?
Yeah, it did. They loved it. Yeah, I mean, you got the odd expression of someone wondering what the hell was going on. But
so you found the way to justify vandalism.
Spraying innocuous substances in people's faces. Yeah.
So we also have Alison Norrington joining us on the panel, who's best-selling novelist, playwright, journalist, CEO of Story Central. But the thing that struck me as interesting in your bio was how you explore and amplify fan incubation and engagement. What does that mean in terms of the work that you do?
Okay, that's a very good question, and not one that I can answer quickly, but I will try.
30 seconds is...
Yeah, right. So basically, I come from, as you mentioned, like a storytelling background. That's always at the front or the middle or the heart of everything that I do. But I believe that there's three things that circle story. That's the narrative design of the story, the pacing, the flow, the genre, the tempo. But then also the experience design of that, how people find it, how you take them through it, and then what happens after. And the third thing, which is often overlooked, is the emotional design. Question I ask everybody that I work with is, how do you want people to feel at the end of your story? And I have to say, most times they say they don't know. Especially, say, for example, in documentary, they say they want to raise awareness. And I always repeat that to say it's very noble that you want to raise awareness, but that's quite a low bar, right? Lots of work goes in to everything we do in terms of creating story and content. And just for people to walk away and go, oh my God, that's horrendous. Anyway, must go, right? That's just horrendous for me. So in terms of fan incubation, it's basically testing around those three philosophies of narrative design, experience design, and emotional design. So it kind of sounds a bit fancy, really, but it's just understanding those three things and how we can create story and experiences and emotional impact, whether that's through fun content for children, whether it's through documentary that's really hard-hitting, whether it's through important messaging through mainstream television. It's always those three things for me that are at the heart of everything.
And do you think that animating in VR lends itself to particular opportunities with that regard? Or?
I do, actually. So I think, in a way, animation more so, because I think some of the 360 video or the sort of live action type VR, if it's a difficult subject, it's almost too real, and I feel it can be a little bit kind of jarring. The immersion part is fantastic, but you can overplay that. And I think there's a lot in terms of an animated set, if you like, that you've created the world and the environment that you can allow people to be more playful within, because the fact it's a little bit of a disconnect from the real world.
Yeah. So we have about 25 minutes before we have to wrap up this session. So I'm going to invite people to ask questions at any time rather than do something at the end. So if you want to ask a question, just put your hand up. I'll find you and cue you in. But we framed this session as the kind of top 10 things you need to know about VR. And we're not going to go through all of these individually, but just to put these out for you a little bit, we've got focusing on your audience, knowing your platform. We've got considerations about the duration of your content, the role of the participant within it. What are they doing? What are they being asked to do in terms of interactivity? We've got questions about what is the added value that is relevant and pertinent to using something in VR rather than another platform. We've got questions about thinking about rewriting material, writing for the VR platform specifically, not just expecting things to apply. We've got relatability as number 5, that making sure we produce content that people can relate to. Creatively rethinking some of the practices and processes around your industry. We've got one around superpowers, which Chad put in there last minute, which I have no idea what that means. We'll come to that in a minute. But I think this idea of, there is that moment we talked earlier of the wow factor of putting it on, thinking this is different from something else we've done before. So perhaps that's what I guess you're getting at. And also you can go to places that you couldn't get to before.
It's actually a very simple way that I found to think about VR, because everyone comes into a new medium only knowing their past mediums. And so immediately people started talking about UX and UI and what's that going to be for VR. And that's a vernacular that was born out of the web, a 2D medium. And Windows was named Windows for a reason back when it was first made. So even operating systems are inherently 2D, and you're looking through at something. So the easy way to think about VR or AR really is think of the real world. Don't think of the web. Don't think of a web page. Don't think of a magazine. Think of the real world, but add superpowers, because now that it's digital, you can do things that you can't do in the regular world. So whether it's AR or VR, that's just a really simple way to think about creatively what it becomes possible, no matter, when you're factor in the audience or the story or the emotion. Those are the tools. You have to understand the tools you're working with, and that's just a simple way to kind of think about that.
So that freedom of movement that it allows. Go on, Andrew.
Yeah, it's thinking about the off-screen as well as the on-screen. You can't approach VR in a classical directorial sense, and you can't assume that classical film directors will know how to shoot in VR or create an experience.
They do not.
Because you don't have you can't frame the shot. The whole 360 world is your shot, so you have to plan accordingly and write accordingly as well. It sounds pretty straightforward, but the number of people you come across who still think on a very 2D linear level on how to produce content, on the framing of the shot, the grading of the shot, you have to throw that out the window and think more holistically on a much wider 360 level.
But that's what I like about animation in VR, because your set actually is the story as well, right? So for example, you walk into a church and you know how to behave by the architectural design of the church. You immediately feel very small. If you make a loud noise, it echoes all around the church. There's places within the church for certain procedures and ceremonies to happen as you go through, right? If you go into a nightclub, we all really don't mind standing really close to each other and being really hot and sweaty and kind of moving around. However, if I suggested we all did that now, we'd all be really freaked out, right? Because the environment, we could try, but maybe it won't be good. The environment dictates part of what the story is as well. Like you go into McDonald's and you don't want to be in there for very long. It's kind of stinky and plastic and red, and you just go in there for the fast food, right? So in terms of creating an environment in animation for VR experiences, I would even take a few steps back to consider what that might be and how then that space lends itself to adding these elements in the story. Like you were saying, like in terms of shooting in VR, the camera stays still, you're trying to direct somebody's attention based on not knowing where they're going to look. So like some of the fundamentals are like sound triggers or light triggers, and it's like why scary VR is really kind of elevated up, because you could have like a darkened room and suddenly there's dog there, snarling at the side of you that you only know because you've heard it growling in your left ear, right? So I think that for animation, it's really exciting. You're already creating the environments, but to have that consideration of how they'll work to guide somebody who doesn't know where to look through.
Yeah. And Chad, we've got a little reel from you from a project that you were involved with or developed. Could you tell us a bit about it and how it relates to some of these sorts of things we've been talking about already?
Yeah, I would love to. Thanks for sharing it. So a lot of the things we're talking about when this opportunity came around for us, having spent years really starting to develop, like how do you do narrative in VR and what works and the technical pipelines to create it, this came across and it just illustrated how a children's vision and it really does lay out the roadmap for all of us. It started ticking all of those boxes, and it's the first VR wish for Make-A-Wish. When asked whatever he would want to do, this little boy asked to go to Saturn in a red rocket ship and meet an alien. And to put it into somewhat of a holistic perspective, obviously that's a specific wish within Make-A-Wish. But as an organization, they also have a problem that they're dealing with sometimes terminally ill children who can't travel. And so a lot of their wishes are very impossible to come true. And so the idea that VR could actually accomplish a thing that was not accomplishable before, that solved a problem for the organization. And then they also, depending on the chapter, have a large backlog of wishes. And so this becomes a possibility of a way to address those issues in a very real world practical use that doesn't require millions of people to adopt the technology. It takes the technology for what it is today and does something great and meaningful with it. So that's the build up.
Okay, well, let's have a look at that clip, please.
The day he was born, August 18th, we ended up having a C-section, and that's when they found out he had a heart condition.
Through it all, he has been stronger than we were.
Both of us, yeah.
Put together. He does not have a great physical heart, but when you see him, you feel a different spirit.
He was always fascinated with stars in the sky, making wish when you see a star. So all of that kind of came out when the Make-A-Wish coordinator came.
So the first thing that went through my mind when I was assigned Zayden's wish coordinator was, wow, how are we going to get Zayden to blast off in a red rocket ship to Saturn?
At that point, I just sat back to see how they're going to make it happen.
First thought was Trick 3D.
I was 100% yes, we are doing this. This wish in particular is massive, and it could only come from a brain like Zayden's, which is so creative.
Zayden's mom recorded a conversation about his vision of every detail in going to Saturn.
That just set the tone. He was the creative director.
What are some of the things that you see in outer space?
Star and the moon. I see some aliens out in green.
Green? Do they talk to you?
Just say beep boop.
Oh.
Beep boop.
It became obvious that Leroy really needed to be a part of Zayden's wish. He's an amazing human being.
We continually strive to do what's next and to do it at a next level. And this project, because the creative vision was set so high by Zayden, has brought all of that to fruition.
To make the impossible wish possible, this is how we did it, and then blew it up 10 times.
Engage the Zayden set. Zayden set is in position. Initiating boarding. Arrived at center. Time to head home.
I think that needs a round of applause. That's incredible. Really amazing to see the project and what's come after it. Has it been something that's been developmental for you in any way?
Yeah, it's, one, because it checks a lot of the boxes of what VR does, there's been a great acceptance of it from Unreal and NVIDIA and other people who are involved in wanting VR, the world to see what it's really capable of. So that's great. And what's great for me is that entire vision was set by a 7-year-old boy who just had no limits. I mean, that's literally his wish, was to go to Saturn. That's great. And then his mom said, okay. So that's also awesome. And then to me, it's one of the things, like, you think about, we all come to it as adults and we start immediately trying to say the things that its shortcomings are. But for this one, you think when you take, any of us go to Disney World or especially a child, they meet Mickey Mouse. He might be 6 feet tall, but they met Mickey Mouse. And so in this case, it's like way even more convincing. Like when he took off his astronaut goggles and we had modeled the same hangar that he saw his red rocket ship come up and go into, he pointed at the ground and said, "My rocket's down there." So for him, that was real. It wasn't a VR experience. He went to Saturn. And that really showcases the power of the medium, I think.
Yeah, cool, very cool.
How long did that take you to develop that? Like from that first moment when you got the brief right through to that day that he tried it?
I think it was about a year that we did, and it was sort of, and we had a team, you know, we were pouring a lot of ourselves into it because it wasn't a big budget. Even though we made it a big budget one, they didn't have a big budget. So we invested a lot into it to help kind of prove out the pipeline. So we were sort of off and on with some of the team members throughout that time.
Okay.
But yeah, I think.
And when he had the headset on, which was like the astronaut, I don't know what it's called, helmet, I suppose. How much agency did he have? Or like, was he completely like passively being taken on like a roller coaster journey, I suppose? Or could he do things in there?
Yeah, we did actually our own testing. We did astronaut training with Zayden beforehand. So he came and we had some different setups where he went through astronaut training, like non-gravity, and we had balls floating and saw what he was comfortable with. We also did gear VR and tested out how he liked that. And interestingly, he really did not like gear VR, but he liked the Vive, the full like ability to move around, and that's what we did the non-gravity in. And but we also knew we couldn't really give him full control over like driving the ship around. So we did do a full VR HTC Vive install. So he was in his ship. He could lean around, move around, and have the parallax and the proximity. But we put him on rails from there, where you boarded the ship and he went on a ride. And then when he went on Saturn, his seat was on a tether that floated out. So he could lean around, but he was always in his seat. So we used the seat as basically the mode of transport.
And how long was he in there?
It's just under 5 minutes.
Nice.
Cool. Interesting. Speaking of Gear VR, where are my headsets?
Oh, they went
So
like 10 minutes
I can see
ago.
some happy painting faces going on. So we got one here. Where are the other two? Hands up if you got one. Great. So if you have done your bit, if you can pass them down towards the other side of the room so other people can have a go on them. Did for anyone it not work? Hands up. Two people. Hands up if it did work. A few more people than that. Okay, cool. Not bad. Oh, I'm trying to pass it. Is it not working? Oh, someone fix it. Okay, so moving on to Andrew, because I think also you've got a couple of clips for us to see, which are campaign films, right? So if you can talk about the process, also just in terms of what you understand about the audience or client, customer experience of the content.
Yeah, so we've got two. I mean, they're not showreels. They're actually just linear files of the actual VR experience. So it's not as exciting as actually trying it in person. But we did, the experience we're going to show you, one is for Diesel, a clothing brand, and that was a 5D experiential experience that they used. You can download it, but they also used it for the launch of their new Brompton Road store, and as part of their Christmas campaign last year. And that is essentially an animated world that we created for their Fermi For You campaign. They had this big campaign. Some of you might have seen it with big furry creatures. It was on adverts and advertising boards. I'm seeing a lot of blank faces. So. But anyway, we had to create this furry world, which created a lot of innuendo, unwelcome innuendo. But anyway, and we created a lot of characters, and you could basically fly through this furry world and experience the land that these creatures come from. We used a sub-pack to link up to the VR again to make it more immersive, and that's the experience where they were spraying perfume in people's faces as well, and they had a fan as well to create that sense of air flowing through your hair as you fly through the sky. So that was an experience we did on the Samsung Gear. There was a small level of interactivity with that. So a lot of the experiences we create are very easy to pick up and play with. So the idea with brands in particular is they want people to, particularly if you're doing an expo or something like that, you want footfall going through and trying out and connecting with your brand. So you want the VR experience to be really simple. A little level of interactivity, something that they can pick up quite quickly, is really useful. And the Samsung Gear for us in these situations is really easy to pick up and play with, which I'm hoping you guys are finding out now.
We're getting somewhere.
The other experience we did was for the NHL All-Stars over in the States. We've done, that's the Ice Hockey League for anyone not familiar with the NHL. And that was in collaboration with Reebok, who came to us and asked us to devise an experience to promote their new, every year they do an All-Star shirt, and they wanted to place the viewer in the middle of the ice hockey rink instead of as a passive spectator, so that they can experience what it's like to be in the middle of a game. It's obvious, it's animation again, it's very stylized. We had to design the characters, design the environment for a limited budget, and work up again, we linked it up with a sub pack so they could feel body checks and stuff like that as they were in the experience. And they had a series of 10 of these Samsung Gears with sub packs out at Nashville and then in LA last year for the game. And we're doing another one for next year with Adidas, who've taken it over from Reebok. But they're quick 2 to 3 minute experiences that you can plug and play again, and they get to experience this immersive world. We rendered it out in stereoscopic 3D, which takes a little bit longer to render, obviously. The latest version we're doing is actually more interactive, so we're doing it through a game engine. But yeah, I mean, we'll play the videos for you so you can have a quick look. But if anyone wants to have a go later, just give us a shout.
So we've got the diesel video coming up first, and if you want to keep the volume lowish, and if you want to say anything more over it, just to tell people, then we can do that too. Let's go for it.
So the idea of this was that you're astride this furry ball, which is one of the characters they had, and you fly through this environment. You have a little bit of control as to where you can go. So this is all kind of being pre-planned.
Is it controls by head tilting, or what is it?
Head tilting, yeah. It's a psychedelic world, so you have these weird cow creatures that were designed actually by Diesel, and they obviously bleed like sheep.
And this was a walk-through experience, so 5 minutes, something like that, 3 minutes? What are we talking about in terms of what duration?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously these have been cut down.
Yeah.
The experience lasts about 3 minutes. And then the other experience is the NHL.
Let's get it
if
up.
You've got that.
Thank you.
Did you bring any sub packs for all of us?
I have a sub pack, yeah.
Okay.
They had a limited budget, but they wanted crowds initially. So anyone who works in animation knows that if you're doing simulated crowds, it ramps up the cost. So we decided to make it quite a moody piece and design the characters. They're very simple. It's essentially 2 different character designs with different shirts. We did a goalkeeper, 3. We did a referee, goalkeeper, an outfield player, and then we changed the shirts.
Just to remind people, you can ask questions throughout the session, so if you've got one, just put your hand up and I'll come to you. But I just got back from Korea for the Global Esports Summit, and we were talking a lot about VR, and it just reminded me there's a company called Virtually Live that is taking a real-time sports event, rendering it into a VR CGI experience with just a 6-second lag between content and experience, which is just mind-blowing. And there's a lot of excitement about what this can bring to that world in terms of different kind of price points as well within the brand, or even around the live experience itself too. So it's interesting to see this, because you could imagine something being rolled out much bigger.
Yeah, and over the years, it's been such a success over there. I mean, we were quite astonished by just how few people have actually tried VR. And the first experience we did was 2.5 years ago now. So, quite at the early stages, and certainly you couldn't buy many kits. And the Vive and the PlayStation VR and Oculus weren't even available then.
Yeah.
So it was all done via mobile. And of course, mobile is a massive driver for VR, and it's set to only increase. PwC, everyone's favorite accountant, did a survey recently on the VR industry, and they reckon but by 2021 there's going to be about 277 million headsets in homes, and 88% of those are going to be mobile-based.
Interesting.
Well, and I think for this group, the interesting part is that's the massive opportunity. Like, there are companies pouring billions into creating a new distribution platform, and very few people have figured out the right content. And so right now there's a problem in the industry that people have those headsets and they put it on when they first get it, and then they don't put it on again because the content's not pulling them in. And so there's a ton of opportunity with very low barrier to entry to create what is the content that works in that ecosystem.
I totally agree. And for me, I do remain an excited skeptic about VR. There's lots of pieces I like from a lot of different pieces of work. So far, nothing that's the entire thing has blown me away. But there's bits I like of all of them, right? But one of my favourite pieces is actually not an animation piece. It's called My Brother's Keeper, which was done for PBS in America as part of the Mercy Street TV series. And basically it's a reenactment of the Civil War, where apparently a lot of brothers ended up on opposing sides. And from the moment you put on the headset, you are confronted with a field of wheat or corn. So straight away you think you're looking in the wrong way, right? Because it's like as close from here to like the end of this stage, right? So you put the headset on, you're like, oh, I'm looking the wrong way, and you turn. And you do a 180 turn, and you see way over in the background is like a forest and a woodland, but it's across a field. So then you think that's where you need to look. Just at the right moment of timing, in this ear, you hear the sound of the wheat rustling, so you look back. And as you look back, all of the soldiers are walking through the field towards you and past you. What that does so brilliantly, without even instructing you, it has made you in the first few seconds do a 180. So as you move through the experience, you're very naturally quite free to turn and look around. Whereas others that I've tried hold you in that moment that you kind of feel then you're looking through a rectangular screen, which is what we're used to looking through. So little techniques like that, I think it's really exciting to explore around. I mean, I thought the way that you onboarded that entire experience of going to, which planet was it?
Saturn.
There. Yeah, the whole thing like was set up in a way that he really felt like he was walking into the experience. So I think there's, like you said, there's lots of techniques that still need to be learned. The technology is going to evolve, whether we like it or not. And I do feel as storytellers, we need to really start stepping up and testing and prototyping. It doesn't have to be massive budgets, like you say. You can really kind of try these techniques out. So by, 2021, did you say?
That's what PwC is saying, not me.
Right about everything.
So we have 5 minutes before we're being asked to wrap up. So if you do have a question, this is your chance. But in the meantime, I guess one of the things that strikes me in terms of the audience here today, if you haven't ventured into VR yet, how should you allocate your resources to explore this? Should you? I mean, maybe people are skeptical about its longevity, about the consumer market that's out there. What things might you say to someone that's wanting to think about entering it, but still has a bottom line that they need to meet in terms of day-to-day income?
My first question would be, why do you want to try it, really? Like the why question, always at the forefront. Not everything needs to be told in VR, and I think it's really a sense of bear in mind who your audience are, how you want them to feel, what their experience is going to be. Like that's got to come at the forefront of all of it in terms of how I think, because there's lots of really bad stuff out there, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because people are trying and testing. But my first question would be that. What do you want to achieve?
But is that question different from any other kind of innovation within animation? Because obviously technologies evolve.
Probably not, because that's always my first question anyway. Why do you want to do this? What do you want to achieve? That's not to like push it down and take it off the table, but to get that sense of what's your end goal, and then reverse design it, if you like, back from that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree. The why is the most important, and then you start breaking it down like you do anything else. Because I think any of us, you only use it if it makes sense. That's like we don't want to do it just for the heck of it. And part of it is like you want to discover a new medium, but there are certain, once you learn just the basics of what does work in VR and how can you emotionally affect somebody. We know what not all of them, they're constantly new ones, but a lot of the tricks in 2D storytelling are that can drive emotion and can drive feeling and drive story and plot. And really pretty recently we've all learned how powerful just a world is in story. Like in terms of Hollywood storytelling, world wasn't really valued as a specific focus until, the past maybe decade to 20 years. And what we have now is we're creating virtual worlds. So what value can that bring and how you access it? The thing I would say is also this is an interesting opportunity that cartoonists and animators are not used to having, but we work a lot with Fortune 100 brands also. And as Apple and Google and Facebook are all investing heavily in this being a future medium, they're banking on a future where the iPhone and all of our phones turn into 3D scanners and quickly, over the course of weeks, scan the entire Earth. And then instead of an app store on a two-dimensional device, they want 3D assets floating out in that world. So if that's the world we're stepping into, and all brands are starting to invest as if it is, then AR, VR is just a question of how you access that world, whether it's a phone version of it or a goggles headset of it. But what's interesting is there's only really one industry that has completely figured out how to handle 3D assets, and that's 3D animation. 3D visual effects handle it slightly differently, but the problem is it's largely proprietary inside certain studios. I'm sure how you handle them are slightly different than how we handle them. But now the entire world of industry is about to be stepping into that. So there's lots of opportunity inside of that framework as well.
Cool. And Andrew, you're going to have the last word here because we've got about a minute and a half before we have to wrap. So thoughts on that topic or something else you'd like to conclude with?
Well, I don't think there's anyone really has a general consensus on where VR is going or what to do in VR or what works best. It's still a very, very young industry. And it wasn't early last year that some of the major headsets actually went on sale. So as consumers, the market's very, 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 very young. The games industry have been playing around with VR for around 7 years, and we're going out to E3 and seeing what they've been doing out there. And if you were watching the panel earlier, they seem pretty disconnected with VR to an extent because it's been in the industry for so long, and they've had they've seen the result of recent game sales and they've seen how the hardware's performing. The take-up is going to be gradual, but as the panelists have said, it's going to be driven by content to a certain extent. Hardware is going to play a part, but so is the software, the platforms, the distribution, the social networks. Not many people think of VR as social because it's inherently quite, enclosed, and you're entering an immersive world which is completely removed from the current world you're sitting in. So there are too many elements to discuss in the final 5 minutes, but I think you've got to make sure that content is geared for the platforms, maximizes the platforms that you're building it for. So whether it's for a Gear VR or whether it's for something more interactive, you create that content for the platform that you're building it for, your audience. If it's for mobile, then create content for mobile users. What's the age range of the demographic of the people you're aiming the content at? If you're doing something for an older audience, they're not going to want that much interactivity. If they're younger and used to gaming, then the Vive and the Rift and other platforms are more readily available, and they'll pick them up quicker. But yeah, there's a bit of a learning curve.
Cool. Well, learning curve is perhaps a good place to end. There's so much that is changing in this world that I think it's crucial to think about what your entry point is and when to start learning. So on that note, by the way, get my headsets to the front for those that have them still. This event was produced with Beth Hewitt from the University of Salford. Please join me in thanking her, Chad, Andrew, and Alison